Who are you in this vast multiverse?
So people have been posting pictures of rock formations like the one you see behind me and comparing it with older buildings. I'm going to throw in some plasma apocalypse perspective for you all too. Here's another example right here. So some people would look at these and say that they were ancient architecture and that architecture had melted, and it does kind of resemble, using a bit of creativity, it does resemble what could be seen as an ancient building or structure of some kind that sort of melted down. And as you can see, if you look closely, people used to live in these. Is it a melted building? When you see these rock formations that look like towers and spires independently standing by themselves, mainstream academics says that this entire canyon and all of these rock formations, that they were once all filled in, and this was all just a mountain, essentially, and that wind and rain over millions of years sort of carved them out, and they all started falling apart. Now, these are called hoodoos. They're also called fairy chimneys, or earth pyramids. There's different names for these, right? But they're naturally occurring rock spires, towers that jet up from the ground. This is one of my all-time favorite examples. This is in China. And mainstream academics basically implies that water and wind rushed through here, slowly, eradicating the rest of it and leaving, for some strange reason, these spires that shoot up from the ground. These ones are extremely tall. Here's another example. This is in China. Once again, as you can see, all of these spires and stuff just poking right up out of the ground. Do you see that? Now, some people may look at this and they may see skyscrapers. That's fine. That's their walk. That's their perspective. It's not mine. I'm going to share mine with you, right? Because I like to balance out imagination with intelligence. So some people might look at this over here and say, wow, that's a skyscraper. I mean, what else could it be, right? If they don't believe the mainstream academic explanation that these were all filled in all the way across with rock and debris and mountains, and somehow it broke down over time from wind and rain, and we don't really see a whole lot of rock, and all of it should just be right there at the bottom, right? A building that melted, right? This is a structure right here. I like it. It's creative. It's people using their imagination, which I feel is a key to really unlocking a lot of our ancient hidden truths. But some people might say, I see a tree. This is a tree stump. This used to be miles and miles high or tall. And this is just the root of it. This is the base of it, or like the leg or the foot of a titan that's been snapped off and chopped off, etc. Now, I like all of those. So what I like to do is to explore them, asking what are the implications. Let's say it's a titan got stuck in the mud during the apocalypse, petrified somehow, and then its foot just stayed there and the rest of it fell down. So the next question is, let's see, can we find the rest of it? Where is the rest of this titan? Another question that I would ask myself, and have often, depending on the height of, or the supposed height of a titan that would be, I'll just make something up, like 15 miles tall or something like that. Could it have breathed? The Devil's Tower, right? So the native myths talk about how these were scratch marks from a bear, that a bear had tried to chase these children upwards. The children were being chased, and then God basically rescued them by lifting up the land into the air, and this huge bear tried to crawl up it, and it was leaving all of these scratch marks on it, right? Rock can appear to be lifted up. I mean, let's say that this particular one right here, academics would say, well, the mountains used to be that high. Like, okay, where is the rest? Where is all that rubble? Well, it blew away in the wind. Okay, well, that doesn't sound logical to me personally. Academics is my least favorite of all of the theories. They say that there used to be a volcano all the way around this. And wind and rain over millions of years blew away the whole volcano, and this part was so solid and strong that it stayed right there. And oftentimes I found that these landscapes are named after spiritual entities, whether they be God or devils, right? Oftentimes like Devil's Canyon, Devil's Tower, Devil's this and that, right? Well, whenever I hear these spiritual wordings, I think electricity. I'm going to give you my theory on how this type of a landscape was instantly created during a worldwide apocalyptic scenario that involves cosmic electricity being introduced from above whenever the firmament, the physical barrier up there in the sky, opened up, allowing all of that electricity in what academics calls the plasmasphere to descend, to come down, and to ground itself, striking the ground in many places and in many different ways. The negative charge that's held in and around this person's fingertips is actually attracting and pulling up the positive charge that's within the sand, right? So the sand jumps up right along with the positive ions that are inside of it, or the positive charge that's inside of the sand, and all of the sand, the physical part, goes up to meet it at the fingertip, turns on the electricity, and the sand, just like with the fingertips, the sand jumps up, it reaches up. Now, if that sand, this sand is more wet, right? So it sticks together. You can see the little electrical currents in there, right? Zapping all over the place, moving it, keeping it in place. And then whenever it's removed, it's flat on the top. And think of the pictures and that scenery that we just took a look at in the American Southwest, right? Here we have buttes and mesas that are instantly formed. If you were on a tiny scale, this would be your desert landscape with all the different, cut down tree formations and petrified tree stumps and things of that nature. But he's got more of a soupy, muddy clay mess here, or a pool, zaps it with electricity, and it lifts up in basically a mesa, right? So the electricity, which is what you're seeing right here in the middle, the electricity runs through it, pulls it up, but it's also at the same time changing its composition. It's becoming more dense. This right here is drying out very quickly right there in the middle, as you can see. And when he's done, this is basically a mesa. So we compare that to this and scenes that we see across the world, just like this. The firmament cracking open, and how it has a direct correlation between the depressurization of our atmosphere and the density of objects, right? Whenever you have more pressure, things tend to be more dense. There's a direct relationship there. When you have less pressure, things become less dense. And then you have all of this mud, right? As the waters down below rise up due to liquefaction. And I'll show you some examples of that too. And it creates clay and mud and silt and debris all over the place, the world across. Now, whenever it starts to dry out under these new conditions with the atmosphere depressurized, it would be much less dense. That this would not have been rock as we're used to seeing it today under such extreme pressures. We cannot apply what is happening today in the modern world and modern conditions and project that onto the past, whenever they may have had conditions that were completely different. So we see things like this. It says, "And will melt the mountains under him, and the valleys will split like wax." But really what it's doing is it's loosening its bonds. It's becoming loose. That will take us to the actual meaning of it, the literal meaning. Now, it can mean melt, like cheese, but it also can mean to dissolve, to come apart. It doesn't mean melt by fire. That's an implication. And you can see it's piled up here. So imagine these are like the mountains. Now he's going to start running around. Now you can see these are like mountains, right? But once he starts going and it becomes very liquid, you can start to see the liquid portions of it there right behind me as it's vibrating. These vibrations cause what's known as liquefaction. And this is basically the mountains have now melted, right? Here's another example. Let me get out of the way and you'll see the mountain melting. We call these mudslides, landslides. This is something that happens frequently. We just see this on a small scale, but if you imagine the entire earth shaking and rumbling, and it's an apocalyptic event, then you can imagine that stuff like this would be seen as melting of the mountains, that the mountains dissolve, that they are torn apart, and they come rushing down. Even trees and everything all together with it. Instant mist, fog, rain, things of that nature. It will be a worldwide storm, which will obviously make the land wet, Combine that with earthquakes the world across and the mountains melt.
Cool.